Hey, IED class, we're looking here at your CO2 car that we've constructed thus far in Onshape. We've got the back wheel created, we've created the front wheel, which is more narrow. We've also made an axle that we're going to use a metal part for, and some of you have already assembled a little bit of it and have been able to watch it revolute and kind of see that spin so you can get an idea of what that's going to look like whenever you print this. But today what I want to do is I got a couple of changes that we need to make to the wheels and the axle diameters. I made a mismeasurement with the dowel calipers. They weren't calibrated correctly. And so I want to show you that, make a couple of corrections there. And then we're going to create a new tab where we're going to start your body if you haven't already. And a couple of main things for the hole for the axle to create. And then we're going to assemble a few of those things together, even more so than what we have now. Okay, so let's start with a few of the changes that you need to make on your wheel. It's only one part. Everything is customizable on the outside, but the inner part where the axle is going to cut through that, we need to make sure that that is a very specific number so it's tight when it goes through. And we're also going to put a cap on the end of that so the axle doesn't go all the way through your tire, but it'll stop on one end. So you really need to decide which is the inside and which is the outside of your tire for your part. And then we can cap it on one side. But the first thing you need to do is go to the sketch where you drew all your circles, which should be your sketch one. I'm going to view that normal. Notice my one here is not constrained. You can get that constrained if you type in the size that you want that to be. I just went by looks on mine. But as far as the diameter goes, that inner one right there needs to be upped to 0.14 inches. Okay. Um, what that's going to do is that's going to make it large enough for the axle to go into, because I mismeasured the axle last time when I made the video. Um, and then it's also going to be tight enough that we can glue that axle in there and it won't move. All right, so that's the number in inches that the inner part of your tire needs to be. Now that needs to happen to your front one as well, so you might have to go to that sketch, look at it normal, zoom in on that inner one, and make it 0.14 inches. All right, if you're in millimeters, make sure you're hitting IN afterwards so you're not getting like some crazy results there. Okay, so that should take care of adjusting the inner part of that. The other thing I want to talk about is we do not want our axle to just pass all the way through this in the assembly. As you can see, the axle could just slide right out, right? And so what we want to do is we just want to do a quick little extrusion on the inner part of these tires or these wheels, so that can happen. And you should be able to do that with just a simple extrude. I think you already have the geometry created. So what you want is you obviously want to get the inner circle of this selected, and you want to extrude that out. I'm trying to get an angle where I can get this one right here because it's in the center. See how it's in the center of the tire? And what we can do is you can see it's already starting to extrude one way. We don't want it to extrude this way because we want the axle to go in, but we do want it to extrude the other way. And you can play around with that depth depending on the size of your tire, of how you created it. I find 4 millimeters is a pretty good place to start, but you might want to jot it down to 3. It doesn't have to be perfect and get to the edge of it. You can have a little bit of excess like this. Make sure it's an add, not a new. And then what you're going to see is that it's capped on one end, and that way we can, and make sure it's halfway so you still have a space that you can get that in there. It's capped on one end, that way the axle can go in, we can glue it, or it's just going to stay in place. All right, and you'll want to do that on your rear wheel as well. All right, so I'll kind of come out here and show that being done also. So I'm going to get this circle here in the middle. Sorry, that's not what I wanted. Really want to get the one in the middle here. I don't know if I can get in there or not. Right there. There we go. That's the one that I want. And then I want to do an extrusion of that. It just depends on what's the inside, what's the outside of your tire. If it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. Make sure it's an add of the part we've already created. And if it's like a merge situation where you can't get that, I think I went a little too far out. That's why that's not going to work. I picked the wrong circle. This one might be a little bit trickier because my sketch is in a different location. That's the one that I think that I want. Oh no, so my sketch is, no, it's in the center. That one should work. Okay. So we want to make sure it's an add merge with this one. Well, that might not work for that one. I might have to get a little creative with how we make that work. So play around with that. Maybe go there and extrude. You might have to do an extrusion and add it of this section here. I don't know if it's going to let me get that or not. There we go. Finally got it in there. All right, and we don't want to go that far, obviously, right? So I'm going to go like oh no, this one's a little bit deeper, so we might be able to go further. Let's try 6 millimeters and see. See, it's not getting far enough out, so I'm going to get a little bit more. There we go. And that should cap the end of it. Get that out of the way. So you can see it's going to cap one end, so whenever your axle comes in, it'll stop about halfway through the center of the tire, and then I'll have a nice good cap that's added to the part and will be printed when we print this. Okay, so just putting some caps on there. You can play around with depth, but be thinking about you want that axle to go into this and stop about halfway through the tire. Okay, and give it enough material on the other end so it's not just going to punch it out anyway. All right, and make sure it's not a new part that you're making, but you're adding to existing material that's already there. All right, so our tires, we have changed the diameter inside of them a little bit, and we have also capped the ends. All right, so let's shift gears to the axle for a second. There is one more change on the axle. Remember, I told you that I measured one part of it wrong. So if you go to the sketch on the axle and view it normal, okay, and I already have it changed on here. I think we did 115, and that was a mismeasurement of my dial calipers. It's an eighth of an inch axle. Eighth of an inch is 125 thousandths. So make sure that you change the diameter of your axle to 125 thousandths of an inch. Okay, so that's something that you need to change. The length of it was still 3 inches, and that's fine. That's in your extrusion. This is adjustable. We'll talk about that more later when we do the assembly. Okay, let's get to the big part of this video, which is the body. Okay, so if you want to create something for this, is a new part studio, and we want to name this. This is the body of our car. If you've already started on your body, that's great. You can continue to add to it. But what I want to show you guys is I want to show you how I made the holes for the axles, because the size of those holes is very particular, and a lot of different things that we're going to change. Okay, so let me open up a sketch. All right, and we're drawing this one from the front view. Okay, the side of the car is actually the front view for us in our drawing. I'm going to view that normal, and we're just going to kind of go through here and create just a generic body. Obviously, yours is going to be your own, but this is just for our drawing purposes. So the generic shape that I want to make is I'm going to go over, I'm going to come up, I'm going to come back, and I'm going to go down. So that's just the basic car design that I'm going with. Okay. Let's do some dimensions on this thing. So we meet our dimensions. The height of it, the tallest it could be was 65 millimeters, which I'm typing in millimeters. It's converting it to inches, so just be aware of that. If you're in metric, that's going to look a little bit different. I'm going to make this 5 millimeters. I'm going to make this down here 190 millimeters, because that's the longest that your car can be. And then I'm going to draw a construction line from here through here, because 5 millimeters is the distance that the hole has to be from the bottom of your car. So I made that 5. So these are where I'm going to make my holes for my car. So I'm going to go ahead and make a couple of axle holes. One here and one down here. We'll do the constraints for it here in a second, and the dimensions. So I'm going to keep that. I'm going to keep the sketch up because we got a couple of things that we still need to change. I'm going to dimension the distance that this is from the side. Okay. It has to be 15 millimeters or closer. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the minimum that it could be. It could go further in on both of these sides, but I'm just going to set that constraint up for now. Okay. I think they can be within 15 millimeters from the edge, but they have to be a certain distance apart. You can look at your constraints for that. Okay. So those are the holes. The other thing is, let's set the dimensions on the actual diameter of this circle. Okay. So for this hole, we want it to be larger than the axle's width, which is 125 thousandths of an inch. But what I found to be pretty good and has nice low friction and it gives you a little bit of leeway on size, is 4 millimeters. Okay, so if you make the diameter of these axle hose 4 millimeters with our axles that I'm providing, the metal axles that I'm providing, 157 thousandths of an inch. You can notice it's larger than the 125, but it's giving you enough wiggle room so you don't have a lot of friction, a lot of slowing down of your car as the axle spins. Okay, that's what I found to be good. So those are the sizes that I'm going with. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and finish that sketch. And then, of course, right now it's just a plane, and we need to extrude that. Okay, so the extrude on this particular one, the width that you can look at your size on your constraint list, but you want to extrude this to a certain depth. Make sure that you're creating new material here because this is a new space. Let me check out and see what depth that I have on this one. I believe I did 36 millimeters, which is the widest that it can be. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in as 36 millimeters. And there you go. Um, you have an example of a body of a car. Yours is obviously going to be your own, but that's what I'm rolling with there. And notice that it didn't extrude my holes, so I don't even have to go back and remove those since I sketched those as my original sketch. Okay, so there's an example of the body of the car. The next video I'll show you how we're going to do the eye holes on the bottom, but for purposes of length, I'm going to kind of move on to the assembly. Okay, so we've got our body created, we've got our axle, we've got our wheels, right? And so now we can assemble all of these things together. We already have, it looks like the rear assembly created, but you'll notice there's some issues because I've changed some of the dimensions of the parts. They're either not fitting or it's different than it was. And I think a lot of it has to do with the caps that I added on the end, right? And so what I want to do is I'm just going to take these and get them out of the way and start over. All right, that way I don't have to worry about missing any of those make connectors and having issues with them. All right, so I'm going to start inserting my pieces. I think for this case, the body is kind of the main point, so I'm going to bring that in and hit the check mark for that and let that be on the origin. All right, and then we can fix that in place and just start attaching our things to it. All right, I think axles are a good place to begin, so I'm going to insert both of my axles. There's one, there's two, and we'll be done with that for right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a revolute mate because we want this axle to spin inside, right? And I want the center of the axle to be in the center of this, right? Hold down shift, make sure that it goes there, right? And you'll see that it's got the same amount sticking out on both sides. And that's what we want, right? So we've got that one done, and then we're going to do another revolute for our second axle, right? Center of it, come down here, zoom in a little bit, hold there, shift. We want the center of that. It's going to revolute, check. All right, so we got our axles. You'll notice that because of the size, we got a little bit of space in between the axle and the hole. We want that because if that's too tight, it's not going to spin freely. All right, and then you're just going to attach your tires to the end. So we got to bring our tires in here. So let's bring in our tires. Our tires we need two in the front, right? And then we need two that are going to be going in the back. Now, I'm going to fasten these with a fasten mate instead of a revolute because my axle is going to spin, and that's kind of how the car actually operates in real life. We're going to glue our axle to these wheels, and then the axle is going to spin within the body. So that's going to be able to spin, but this is going to stick, all right? And so to get this mate, we're going to go here. Now, you'll notice because of our caps, we're going to be able to get a very specific part of this. We want to be into our inside of this, so it's butted up against it, right? So we want that to go to the end of the front. So that's a front tire. So we'll make sure we put that on the front, that here, right? And then let's go to our next fasten mate. Make sure we like that. I think it put it backwards on me, didn't it? Yeah. So let me go back to that. Close that fasten. Let's go here, and we want to flip that around. There we go. Now the cap's on the outside. That's what I wanted. Sorry about that. All right, let's go to this one. And let's do another fasten mate, right? Let's make sure that we're in there on, we don't want that, we want that, right? And then we want to come around here and fasten it to this. And let's see if that's the way that we like it. Or is it on the cap? It did the cap again, so we're going to have to flip it. I think I might be picking the wrong connector on the first selection. That's okay. All right, so make sure you get that cap on the outside, right? So that's ready to go, and then we should be doing the same on the other. So let's do a fasten mate for the rear. Put those in there. There we go. On that. And we might have to flip it around. We did, and that's okay. And then we'll do the same for this one. Connection there to there, and flip, check. All right, so we should have a car, and you can change colors of your things. I only did my front tires. You can change the color of some of your parts, but you should have this. Now, one thing I want to say before the end of this video, I mean, you can make these revolutes animate and kind of watch your tires spin one at a time, right? If you right click and animate and hit play, you should be able to see that spinning on both sides, right? Because the axle spinning, not just individual tires. You can do that for both the front and the back. But you'll notice there's a lot of space here on the axle between. So the option that your team's going to have is you might cut that axle down to a shorter length so you do not have a big of a gap. Or your other option is you could 3D print another part like a bearing and put in between this gap. And that's something we'll talk about in future videos. This one's getting kind of long already as it is. But you should have the ability to get your axle the right size, your wheels the right size, your body with the holes the right size for the axles, and put all together for some type of view that's very basic. We'll work on the eye holes that go on the bottom next video. And then the rest is a lot of customization from you. But that's where I'm going to stop this particular video and allow you guys to pause it as you work through it or whatever and whatever you need. But I hope your car is coming together and looking well, and good luck.